Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I want to thank Christy Ferrantella from the Chamber of Commerce. She is here with us today. And Wendy Hudson from Many, Many Things, Bookworks, Cisco Brewers, and most very exciting, the State Reopening Advisory Board. You were on that recently. We were very lucky to have somebody that understands Nantucket, the islands, and the Cape, and the seasonality. So we're going to get right into this new reopening order from the governor. But before we dig into the details, Wendy, would you be able to talk to us about the process that you went through for 2 or 3 weeks, I believe?
Sure. Well, it was announced, and I'm not going to remember the date, but roughly 3 weeks ago, yesterday, I think the governor announced the formation of a reopening advisory board put together. I don't know if the composition was set at that time, but, a mix of people. It was 3 very prominent healthcare people, including the commissioner of public health, MPH, whatever. We're talking about acronyms, they're all over the place. So doctors, community leaders, mayors from several communities, statewide, a lot of different businesses. I was definitely by far the smallest business. We did have, in addition to me to represent the Cape and Islands, we had Linda Markham, the president of, and maybe but definitely president of Cape Air. And then we had some also Western Mass people that were representing the Berkshires with very similar issues of seasonality that we're all running into right now. So that board, the governor laid a lot out in that press conference, like this board's going to be looking at this, that, and the other. And the process was just endless Zoom meetings with a lot of different constituency groups. I think the total was something like 75 different groups in about 45 hours of Zooms over the last 2.5 weeks. My position there came through my involvement with the Retailers Association of Massachusetts, RAM. So I was on the RAB because of RAM. And I've been on that a number of years. So and through that, I've been on a few other state boards like the Rural Policy Advisory Commission, the Economic Development Commission this past fall, which that whole plan is basically tossed out the window because it was all reacting to the pressures of an incredibly fast growing economy, which now we're in a whole different set of circumstances, obviously. And an insurance one or something. But so that's kind of the reason that I'm known in those circles. And I guess, I'm glad that a small business person was included. Certainly glad to try to do my best to represent, the interests of booksellers and small breweries and the Cape and Islands. But of course, any influence was quite limited, and advisory boards don't get to vote. We weighed in our thoughts on a lot of things, but many things came out that we hadn't even seen or, had been changed based on what our guidance was maybe on Saturday, like might have been tweaked for Monday. But so, take it with a grain of salt, but.
So your experience there, what came out when you saw it yesterday, when you saw the full plan? Were you kind of shaking your head like, yep, that's pretty much what I heard for those 45 hours of Zoom calls? Or was it?
Pretty much. I mean, the overarching thing is kind of the conservative approach to safety, the focus on public health. And, as a business person, my mind and a lot of us are so, we're paranoid about this virus and really terrified, for our loved ones, et cetera. But it's the economic impact that I kind of am like, oh my God, that keeps me up at night. And I was interested because the focus was so definitely on there is no economic health if the public health, plummets. So that was by far the top takeaway. So I think you saw that in that plan yesterday that, we predicted that, probably 75 to 80% of people were going to be frustrated that it didn't move fast enough. 20 were going to think it went too fast, and then like 2% were all on the Zoom calls for the last 2 weeks because there was so many people and knew that everybody was trying to balance it to the best of their ability. That said, there were a couple curveballs. The barbershop salon thing had not really been vetted, and I don't mind saying so publicly because that's a real sore point for retailers. We're making the point that, why can't you have by appointment, sales it's much less contact, it's much more distance, and that was an outlier because everything we'd been talking about was very much focused on limited exposure time and allowing distance. So,
right, Christy, do you have any questions for Wendy on the up to today?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, how each different member of the board, were you guys kind of targeted with different sectors? Like, did you listen in on some things about tourism, or were you guys all on every call?
We were all on every call, and that was sort of a little bit of a surprise to me too, because including the Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Mike Keneally of the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. They were the two co-chairs of this. I should have mentioned them earlier. So there we are on our Zooms, the entire time, and I'd say almost all of us were able to be on almost all of them. Especially those of us in a little bit more of a voluntary capacity, sort of the business people, like this, what's more important than this? Pretty much nothing, and then I was scrambling to do my book orders, et cetera. But, we were really committed. Some of the mayors and especially the commissioner of the T and public health were pulled away, slightly more than us, but I know they were being briefed by their staffs, et cetera, the whole time. So, I think something that I thought we spent a lot of time talking about that maybe wasn't reflected publicly as maybe as much as could have been was the focus on sort of like what I call with my business speak a triple bottom line. I've always talked about that more in terms of the environment, but in this context, it was public health, economic health, and then mental health. So we were really kind of advocating for access to parks, and communities and getting people outside. And with that focus, the focus on worship yesterday, which in the context we were talking about, I wanted provisions for funeral gatherings outside. I felt like that was really important. During this whole time, my cousin lost her husband and he had a stroke. He was 56 in Michigan. And it was it's just been time, and it was just breaking for people trying to gather, so I think, that was something we really tried to say, like, what would be important. And we were advocating for maybe a little more museums opening. I'm on the board of the NHA, and I haven't had a chance to tell James, but I was trying, because museums are set up to be big and distant and guarded, so it felt like honoring our culture was really important. And I don't think that got really spoken about much yesterday at the governor's presentation. And I hope we see that focus a little bit.
Well, it doesn't help museums right now, but it does help to know that we're bringing it up and the group was thinking about it and pushing for it, right?
Oh yeah, it wasn't, it was me. It was like, we had some really, really neat people, the head of the Museum of Science, Children's Museum, the MFA all on the call, along with some smaller zoos and things. And, and then the heads of all the sports teams, and there's like Cam Neely and, the head of the Red Sox. And, we're all just like, open, we're just so eager for all of these institutions to get going. But even in their presentations, they were, guarded and safe, and this is how the steps we see going forward. So everybody was very much aligned on how to just protect the public health.
Christy, do you want to take us through the kind of basic outline of what came out yesterday? And then we get into some details and some different sectors, and then we all can just kind of have a conversation about what we're seeing and hearing and wondering about.
Yeah, of course. So phase one is very much kind of that start phase. So it's very limited opening, focus on construction, manufacturing, and places of worship. And then starting next week, there'll be a couple more expansions of phase one. So you'll have curbside retail, hair salons, and outside car washes and pet grooming. There's also going to be an opening of office space, very limited, so 25% capacity. And I think that is everything in phase one. And so it's very limited. Everything that's been open can remain open. They just have to adapt to this new state guidelines and have the new checklists and procedures in place. And then this is meant to be a kind of 3-week-ish between phases, and then we'll move into phase 2.
Depending on stats, right? Depending on numbers. Like that's a lot of questions I'm getting. Is it weeks or is it the numbers? And it's kind of like, well, it's both, but I think the number one priority is seeing the numbers trending in a certain way. Is that right? Is that how you guys are reading it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll say to that the point being, if this virus takes 14 days to show up, you need at least a week to have a new set of interactions before you can tell if there was an impact from it. That was another thing that was a surprise. You'll remember at the last week's select board, I had asked the question, is this Monday? And he's like, oh yeah, it's Monday. And I was like, oh geez, that seemed too soon. And I expected a 72-hour notice because the Mass Municipal Association had been really asking quite rightly for that kind of notice. And then suddenly it was like not just 72 hours or maybe, like from yesterday to this coming Friday, it was next Monday. And that was quite the disappointment. I was like, wait a minute, huh? We didn't talk about that. And they never had really said the minimum of the 3 weeks. It was sort of implied, but never quite said as strictly as yesterday. What I will say is we've seen, that they popped in opening of golf and they popped in having employees in for fulfillment and home delivery. So there's opportunities for incremental shifts within that. And I know that there'll be a lot of, because this was light on details. So I think the groups that maybe can make the case best. An example of that the Retailers Association is pushing for, and we had our annual meeting this morning, was just by appointment, because there's a lot of furniture stores, small furniture stores and pianos and things like this that are getting just crushed, and you cannot do a curbside couch or piano really. So that argument really makes sense, and I think I would expect and hope that there'll be some movement there.
What is the big difference between our stay-at-home order we had before yesterday and now the safer-at-home order? Is there anything different?
That's a question I would ask of you guys if you'd seen any guidance or, like from the Department of Health, the Board of Health here. I didn't see a whole lot at all, honestly. It was a little bit odd. But I guess maybe just the recognition that people are really having quarantine burnout and really fried, and there are people that might have interpreted just a little more loosely to go for on Nantucket we've been lucky, I will say. I don't think too many people have been shy about hopping in their car and going to the beach necessarily, and I don't think I've seen people abusing this freedom. But there are definitely more cars on the road than there were 2 weeks ago or a month. So people are antsy to move around.
All right. Christy, do you know the difference or a difference?
I was just going to say it's just been urged to stay at home as best you can. And so as they're opening up, it's still kind of encouraged, like, yes, you can go get your hair cut and you could go get curbside retail next week, but do those things and then kind of stay at home as much as you can. It's all about, everybody wants to be safe. Nobody wants to get the virus. So just trying to keep everybody from gathering, I think, is the main point.
Exactly. And throughout every phase, the emphasis was on vulnerable populations, people with conditions to just continue vigilant, stay at home.
Was there a new group set up for restaurants and lodging? And when did that start? And what is that? Is there a time frame for that? Does anybody know?
That's a fabulous question. If you guys haven't heard more, I did ask Secretary Keneally that question today for the benefit of the others on that on our board call, because it was news to us, and I was really glad about it. The Lieutenant Governor mentioned it on our call on Saturday that this new group had started, and I believe Steve DiFilippo, the restaurateur from Davio's, who I would say was the next small business up from me, and that's pretty big. Davio's is quite a restaurant group, but yeah, I guess for tourism. So I'm knocking on wood that they'll present something. Is light on details.
Can we just explain to the public what is the group? I don't think we have touched on.
I don't know. I think it's just an advisory group along the lines of what we were in a broader sense for the whole Commonwealth, focused on like how could we get something moving quicker for the Berkshires and Cape and Islands. And Tanglewood announced the Pops aren't, the orchestra won't be there, and so they're facing an equally dire situation as we are with all of our major events canceled. So how can we salvage something, perhaps some outdoor. We were pushing pretty hard. I would say the group was really trying for outdoor restaurants in phase one. We were like, just the restaurants are dying. We need them that can be done safely, please. 4 tops, whatever it is, in the streets, whatever it is. And you guys have had great creative discussions about it. I know, like, why not? But so I love if that could just be a phase 2. I'm not holding my breath, but I think that's the kind of thing that I would hope that they'd be thinking about, just to get some money coming in, because we're on the edge here.
Christy, do you know?
I was going to add, I know that Wendy Norcross from the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce is part of that committee.
Yes.
And so they're definitely advocating for how much kind of we have those 12 to 14 weeks between Memorial Day and Labor Day for the Cape and Islands, as well as the Berkshires, to really tap into, like, that's when our businesses are in business. And so anything that we could do to help these businesses get open a little bit quicker, even if it's not the rest of the state.
Yep.
What about camps? What are we seeing with the camps? If somebody hasn't, imagine someone who's not read anything on the state mass.gov site. What are they saying about camps? What are we hearing?
From my understanding, there was or is a whole separate channel of people, like a big group working on child care, on a broad sense, certainly higher education, et cetera. Camps, I think sleepaway was probably not going to be happening, but everybody's trying very hard to get day camps going. I heard the lieutenant governor mention that yesterday. That's been a very sticky, tough thing, and it was always, as I've mentioned before, one of the big enablers of starting an economy is to make sure your children have somewhere safe to go, and that's a big issue for an awful lot of people.
Christy?
Yeah, it's the same things I've been hearing is kind of the sleepaway camps are on hold till probably phase 3, but recreation may be able to open as early as phase 2.
So there's a chance that if human behavior, if we do what we're supposed to do, and we see all these good trends that the state is measuring, and that we're probably measuring here, that a lot of certain camps could be open here in Nantucket for the summer. I don't want to say which ones, but that's outdoor camps. It's still a possibility, possibly sometime in June, just to give some hope out there.
Hopeful.
That's another question I would have for you guys. I felt like a lot of times it was good for that report to not be overly prescriptive for everybody, because as we all know, there's different situations everywhere. And I hope that you as select board members can, look at our situation and be able to make a good decision, or our board of health or whatever. I don't even know who regulates a camp, but it did feel like some local control was appropriate in a lot of these situations.
Yes, especially I know that the beach regulations coming out. Jason and I had talked earlier today about, it feels like it's kind of in the local hands of how we want to kind of monitor and control beaches. And so we're hopeful that we have, the best interest of our town and our visitors, but still be able to have a safe summer.
Yeah, I was saying to you this morning, Christy, that if a lot of this is in our hands, if we behave well and we're smart, and you pull into a beach parking lot that's packed, yeah, it's a pain in the butt to drive 15 more minutes to go to another beach, right? When you were thinking about this particular one. But if we can handle it well on our own with personal responsibility, then the town entities don't have to come in and potentially monitor and shut down parking lots for beaches. And right, I think the overstand vehicles was, at least what I read, was 15 feet between each car, and beaches where you can drive on, right? And if we abuse that, then it's going to force the hand. I mean, I'm not, it'd be threatening. I see this happening, right? If we can do things well and be smart, then it's less resources on our town, entities or town departments, and we can get to phase 2, right? And then we can get to phase 3. That's what I'm hopeful about.
Yes, me too. Just a reminder to everybody who is logged in and watching, you can submit questions on the YouTube chat. So if you have any questions for Wendy or even myself and Jason, please feel free to submit those.
While we're waiting on that, Wendy, could you guys talk about not to pick on hair salons at all, but if I can go in and get a haircut, right? Because I'm tired of my wife doing it, and she's doing a great job, but it'd be nice to get a haircut. But I can't go into your shop, Wendy, and buy a book. So, kind of what happened there? Or do we?
I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. We were pretty surprised. It went against the conversations we've been having the whole time. I don't even know if there'd been a whole ton of outcry or lobbying, with PGA and golf. I can sort of understand the way the world works there, but I don't really understand that salon thing. I mean, one point that we kind of kept making was that just because you can open doesn't mean you have to. So certain businesses whose employees don't feel comfortable, or if you can't make the money work, like I'm really looking very closely at that. Like, can I really have 2 stores open doing curbside? Probably not. Like, that probably doesn't make sense. Like, can staff it more minimally, and we were in a rush to get back to normal, but it just the numbers don't add up when you're doing such a reduced volume. So it might make more sense just hold out until a later phase. Certainly, just to see how it's going in other states that are opening just a little earlier. Give the barbershops another couple weeks over there and see what happens. One of the main things, one of the giant elephants in the room is the liability and there are no answers. You can just sense in this litigious society what could happen, and it's not solved. Nobody should pretend it is. I think if we all comply by the guidance as very much as possible, but it's everyone's first pandemic in this world, and that's the kind of thing that again keeps me up at night, because anything could kind of happen. Heaven forfend somebody false worries tracing, because obviously tracing is an awesome thing to do. Like, the more the better. Contain it. But if it's traced back to your place of business, suddenly you've got a liability on your hands, and who wants that? So that's a tension, and it'll need to be solved legislatively. That was nothing like I was really pushing for an answer on it, both on Friday, Saturday, and today again, just because I wanted everyone in the RAM board to hear what the secretary had told me, which was that it was purely legislative. Governor had no way to say that, and might even need to be federal. You see how much good our business interruption insurance did. Nothing. And so unless there's a federal fix there, it's very, very frustrating.
Well, you make a good point about not just because you can open doesn't mean every business will open. So my little coffee shop could have been open this whole time, and I closed for 6 weeks because staff didn't feel comfortable. I didn't think the market people wanted to come in and get something, and so I stayed away. And we might see that, right? The market's going to decide a lot of this. Are people going to be wanting to go in and do X, Y, Z when they can open? Like, that's another big question. The question just came up from Brooke Moore is, can we ask you, Wendy, about house cleaning? We've been told that the state is saying no, and then we saw, I don't have it with me, one of the orders come up and it said it was currently allowed, and then they took it off 3 hours later yesterday. So,
no kidding! Wow, yeah.
About cleaning, did any conversations come up in any of your groups?
Not about house cleaning, honestly. I guess I thought that would be included in a pretty much a first phase, because cleaning is the number one thing what we're supposed to be doing in our businesses, and I can't clean these stores top to bottom. Plus I love, the woman I've had helping me for 25 years probably, and I want to support her. I know she wants to work, and I feel very, very confident about that. I need her to make it all clean and safe for my customers, so the cleaning thing should have been addressed on a house cleaning basis. I don't know why I really don't know why it was on and then taken down.
We're not sure either. Christy, do you have something?
I was just going to add that I think businesses have been given kind of really clear guidelines. Just talking about the cleaning, that was something I was really impressed with that came out of this report. Is kind of each sector has their sector circular and their checklist, things that you have to sign off on. And it's very clear kind of how you can open and what's expected of you, and really detailed by industry. And they even have email addresses if you have any questions. So I was really impressed with that. So thank you to the advisory board for putting all the work into that as well.
Well, that was definitely our, directive. The staff did everything. We didn't do anything, but we did make an incredible point that it had to be simple, understandable. It had to be in multiple languages. I think it only began with Spanish yesterday, but we said it must at the same time, come out, and then they're going to roll out other languages as they can. And, I liked the model that Secretary Pollock from the T put forward, which is the construction. I think we talked about this, the select board just self-certify, and that you have the checklist, and the Board of Health can come in and ask for your plan. And if you've got your checklist from the state, this is my plan, and that works. And awesome. And it just streamlines things. There's an assumption that you want to do it right. There's, the expectation that, if you need help, you can get help. I should mention the distillery. So my husband, Randy, is a distiller for, 888 and Cisco, et cetera. And we have hand sanitizer out there. So if anybody needs hand sanitizer, we're selling it at a, not at any kind of crazy cost, just to try to help fill a need if there is out there.
What do you, where do you think, kind of, that's another big question or elephant in the room. Everybody wants to know, like, short-term rentals, hotels. What were some of the discussions that you heard? I know we already talked about, there's an ad hoc group already that started May 15th that's working on that. Is there anything that you could enlighten us on?
I wish I pushed for a little bit more conversations. You're always afraid because you don't know what you want to be told. But I have a short-term rental that pays for the Bookworks building, as most people know. It did a big reno 5 years ago, not cheap on this island, and the short-term rental, supports that. I don't know what's happened. Like, I have not. I don't know. I don't know what to hope for either. Part of me wished it would just be like, okay, no short-term rentals. It's got to be this. And I could just move forward and cancel the ones I did have, the reservations that are July and August. And I could have said, okay, it's going to be 2-week or 1 month minimum. And I could have started fresh, but that guidance wasn't forthcoming yet either. So I'm completely personally vested in that question and frustrated by it.
And I've heard, time and time again, Massachusetts is really unique in our state law that when you have a short-term rental, the owner gets the money kind of upfront. And so refunds are really difficult if you got the money a year ago and it's been spent, whereas other states don't release the income to the owner until the actual stay is confirmed and executed. And so that's been a really big challenge for a lot of our Massachusetts renters.
I can say, kind of back to what we talked about 5 minutes ago. For somebody, I have 2 tiny small businesses, one that's open, and I have a lot of the regulations in place, and we've learned a lot. We're super safe. And then I have another business, the bike tours, which is outdoors. And now I have some information of what the state wants for me to open. I can open next week, right? So hand washing station outside, and this, and this. Things that I would kind of probably already knew, but now I definitely know. So really, it's just really helpful for someone has like a charter tour type of company. And so I have some of that information to make decisions on. And so that's one of the positives that came out of this. And I hope each week we're going to know more and more and more for each sector. It's pretty detailed, but like you were saying, Wendy, it gives you a template and a checklist, and you put it in place. And then now everybody knows what you should be doing. And I think restaurants, Wendy, you and I had this conversation before, have had 1,000 rules always to abide by, right? Temperatures, and the cooler's got to be this, and you got to have this ready. And retail hasn't had all of that.
Right.
And I think retail will be able to adapt because it's going to be slow in phase. But do you see anything? What are some of the challenges for retail coming ahead?
Well, I mean, getting used to that and wearing wearing a mask all the time, it's very, very annoying. If you haven't done it, it's like, and it's hard to chat and interact. It takes away so much of the personality, I think it's going to be hard. I was happy. I guess a couple things you mentioned, the gloves. And I don't. We had these discussions, and I haven't dived that closely into the website to know if this made it in. But the point being, gloves are almost an illusion of cleanliness, so it's actually kind of great to have your hands. Just frequent hand washing is better than glove wearing. So that was good. I didn't want to have to wear gloves all the time. And I think that they're finding it's the face-to-face transmission that's the issue. And it's not like you don't have to be completely paranoid about the boxes that arrived from UPS or whatever. There's just not evidence that that's a transmission thing. Because if we had to really like wipe down everything multiple times a day, it would be impossible.
The rule of thumb in restaurants is every time you change what you're doing, you have to wash your hands or change your gloves if you're wearing gloves. So if you're handling credit cards and money and you go to put books away, you got to wash your hands, you got to change your gloves. So every time you move something, which is hard to do if you only have one person at a place, right? Versus having, everybody doing only one thing for an extended amount of time. But I think we'll adapt and we'll get better at it. It's just a new normal.
Definitely. So Wendy, a lot of the questions that we've been receiving is kind of when will information be released for the next phase? And I know everyone's anxious to get things, and I didn't know if you had any insight as to, what restrictions there might be on lodging or, kind of what phase 3 or phase 4, kind of when that information would be available.
Certainly no, specifics, as everyone's used to being told and hearing. But I know they are working to get those guidelines that they released kind of yesterday. Here's phase 1 and here's the guidelines. I think they're going to be like, here's the guidelines for phase 2 that's coming at a point to be determined. So that's, I hope, a little bit helpful. I will say I don't think it's going to be surprises. I think most of what we've seen is pretty much what all the CDC guidelines and what each industry has already been talking amongst themselves and already knows. So I wouldn't say there's anything shocking, at all. And again, the question of what kind of local manipulations might be, I guess comes into play there. But yeah, I don't know about the timing. I hope that we'll see more rolling information, that this focus that we saw on just wait till the 18th, stops and it becomes a little more of a conversation than that might be wishful thinking on my part. As far as what this group is doing, the reopening advisory board, they've said that we'll do a wrap-up meeting at some point, maybe later this week. Nothing's on the calendar yet. And, we were all like, having spent so much time, we're like, if we can be of help, of course we'd, be willing and chime in on phases 2 and 3, but I don't really expect they'll use us that way. I think our public relations value of being able to spread the blame, share the credit, whatever, has been served. But that said, they might tap us sort of in our own industries, I think, and as conduits for sort of information sharing. Who knows?
So moving forward, do you know who will be keeping track of the metrics? I know in the report it says, if anything kind of trends negatively, a sector might be shut down or a region. Will it be kind of the Department of Public Health or will it be local Board of Health?
It would be working in conjunction, but definitely the Department of Public Health expects to play a really strong role. And is it the Department of Health and Human Services too, I believe, is pretty involved there with their crisis center. So I think, because we did ask that question, of course, everyone does, what if a regional hotspot, certainly what you guys have spent a ton of time talking about. My attitude is, let's not borrow trouble. Let's wait and just hope for the best. We've done so well here. And if everyone's really being good, as you say, Jason, then let's hope it continues in these trends before we worry about it falling off a cliff. But I think they're ready to just see, and help and work really closely with the Board of Health.
Just to jump on top on that one, Christy, is as things come out, I'm sure it's going to be every couple of days, there's going to be another clarification or something added. how do we know, as it's, we were all waiting for the 18th, so we were all watching for that 11 a.m. press conference. But now when it comes out, are there alerts that we can sign up for? Do we need to check the chamber website like we do the hospital website at 5:45 every day and crash the website? Where do we find all this out?
From my point of view, I would go straight to the chamber website and what all the great information Christy's been sending out, because you're just doing a fantastic job, and I'm grateful. And I've heard that from a lot of the community too. Like, we're just like, wow, really lucky to, have your leadership in that capacity. From the state, I mean, even, I found out about the retail, that we'd been advocating for and we expected to come, but even the board, we didn't hear about the relaxation of that, small rule a couple weeks ago until, I got it from the RAM email. So I guess trade groups, it's just a time to be very, focused on the news and paying attention. I guess anybody who's got a horse in the race better keep following it closely. And maybe they will set up some sort of an alert. That reopening website does have mass.gov/reopening is where all these resources are found online. Maybe you guys said that, I don't remember, but and there are a lot of great links. And that dashboard that was referenced, I think it was Secretary Sutters that mentioned the stoplight sort of red, yellow, green thing that will be posted there at least weekly. They'll still do the daily updates, as we've seen the number of new cases, et cetera, posted every day. So that'll continue for what it's worth.
That's good. Yeah, and I would definitely recommend people to join their trade association. I get the RAM emails. That's where the retailer, a lot of the information comes from. Massachusetts Lodging Association, Massachusetts Restaurant Association. Each night, they're providing so much information to our businesses.
So that's good. So the chamber, I think you mentioned earlier this morning a Facebook page
we have a Facebook group. It's #ActTogether. And we post updates on there and resources, webinars, things like that.
And then your Facebook page for the chamber, I'm sure, is updated with anything that comes out. And then your specific sector, find that state lobbying group or state association.
Definitely.
Anything else? Any text alerts? Anything for the people who love notifications and get that dopamine fix? Is there a text alert that you can sign up for with the state or with the chamber, anybody?
There's a text alert for the state, but it's overall COVID updates. So it also gives you information about where to get tested. But every day you get notified when the governor is going to speak, and also kind of the main points of his speech.
Okay.
Here's a question, Chrissy, maybe I had someone reach out today about tracing and how that works, and if you did have to help somebody in your, maybe an employee or whatever, get traced. I know that the governor has spoken a lot about the tracing operation in Massachusetts, but I don't know a lot of details about it. Do you have information of this ad on the website too? Probably. Just occurred to me to.
I think it's on the town's website. I know they are recruiting tracers. I think we have 36 tracers on island already so far, 32 or 36. And that's being run through the town's Department of Health Department.
Okay, that's helpful.
That would be. I would either call the hospital or the health department. If it's after hours, call the hospital, then they can direct you to where you need to go for contact tracing. Okay, anything else as we wrap up here?
I think the biggest question that we're having is childcare, and I think that's one of the things that just remains unknown. With centers still being closed through June 29th, and maybe camps opening up, I'm wondering if he might relax that June 29th deadline. I
sort of had a feeling that they would like to, not that they will, but that they would like to, because it's such a problem. Do we have emergency childcare provisions on Nantucket? I thought so too, and it was not something I'd been very tuned into until they spoke about how the capacity was really only at about 30% statewide being used, which I guess was a good thing, because it meant, okay, if you have to go back to work, there's room somewhere. But I wondered, I assumed the island must have one, but it was not something I'm close to.
I have 3.
Sorry, you were getting ready to say that. Okay. There's currently 3, and believe one of them goes up to age 14, one goes up to age 8. And there's potentially maybe one more license going to be given. They're subsidized from the state, but you have to go through the EDC. There's a link on the EDC MassGov site where you can apply to do that, but there's a lot of hurdles. It's not easy. You just can't, apply for the license and send it in and open up. It's not that.
I think, the conversations we had were, how can that be streamlined? But everyone recognized that that's just not something you can't mess around too much with making sure that, somebody's appropriately trained and responsible in childcare. So
I believe it was pushing care.com because there's educators and there's people who have that kind of experience where you could get somebody to help you with childcare. But that's also, if you have the means, it's a very expensive route to do it.
Right.
Anything else before we wrap up here?
I just want to thank you, Wendy, for contributing and being a part of that, and also attending Select Board and giving us updates. It's been really valuable to our community.
Okay, well, thank you both for your great work on the Select Board and keeping the rock solid. Definitely.
This Nantucket Small Business Update is funded by Keep the Rock Solid, which is an initiative. So thank you for that initiative. Thank you, Christy, and everybody who's involved with that. This has been very helpful. Thank you, Wendy, for spending 45 hours on these Zoom calls, plus the Select Board, educating us. That's a lot of time in 2 weeks. That's another part-time job you signed up for, so thank you.
As I say, nothing more important than trying to work our way through this conundrum safely and as well as we can all make it out and support each other along the way.
Well, thank you both. And thanks for everybody for listening. Thanks for the couple comments that came in. I hope this is helpful. Again, thanks to NCTV 18 and the Chamber Keep the Rock Solid for putting this on. And we'll see you all next Tuesday.